Wheels and a happy new year as well. We thought New Year seemed like a good time to start a new series, but you can still go back and listen to any one of the 23 episodes that we recorded last year. And for those of you who follow Spinning Wheels on Instagram, you'll see we've upgraded our virtual studio a bit as well. A bit of fun and a glimpse into the inner workings of my brain. Yes, I really am that much of a nerd when it comes to race cars. But every race car nerd needs a professional racing driver to balance things out. So Guy Smith is back once more to take us on some adventures behind the visors of some of the sport's biggest characters. And of course, take us leaf by leaf through his big book of racing driver contacts. Guy, Spinning Wheels happened because we were in lockdown last year. Way back in spring, it's sort of fitting that we're back in lockdown for the first one of a new series, although fitting's probably not the right word. Can we see you back in a race car anytime soon?
Well, where do I start? So the answer to the question is yes, hopefully you'll see me in a race car soon, which is great news. Yes, back in lockdown again. I mean, we were here, almost 12 months ago, and when we started the podcast, and I never thought we'd be 12 months later, we'd be sort of in the same situation. In fact, you can see I've got a Desperate Dan beard, sort of out protest of being in lockdown. So I'm going to shave that off once we get released. But yeah, it's a shame, but hopefully we'll get this, have some pain now, and by the spring, summer, we'll back to the sport that we love doing, and hopefully some kind of normality. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Now, our first guest of this new series, if we can call it that, is someone who firmly positioned himself as the most successful driver of one of America's most iconic car brands. And in the process, it's added a few more accolades, such as Le Mans victories, 5 of those, and the American Le Mans Series title, 4 or 5 of those. There's a bit of conflict between social media and Wikipedia on that one. We'll have to check. A long list of other accolades as well. He's best known, though, for racing Corvettes, but that is not where the story ends. The question is, where does the story start? Welcome to Spinning Wheels, Oliver Gavin.
Hi, guys. Great to see you.
Where does the story start? You were quite, it was quite conventional. You went karting.
Yeah, I suppose it was a conventional start for me. I started karting with my brother. I was 11, he was 13. My father just ran us. And it was actually through another driver at the time, James Rhodes, and his father. He got us into it. And yeah, we did that for about 7 years. It was a lot of fun. I raced against Guy, with Guy, a few, I think we did the World Championship against one another once, if not twice, maybe.
Yeah, I keep putting out all these pictures and finding you. And you were still pretty lanky then, to be fair. You were all kind of arms and legs.
There's one hanging out of the cart.
Yeah, I was a little bit like that, and many questions about that recently. And yeah, it was a fun time, great childhood, but didn't have a huge amount of success. I mean, I won the championship at Kim Bolton, my local track, and I was on the front row of the national championships for junior Britain, I think it was, but for the start of the race. But yeah, didn't really get any major accolades. And then I got into cars at the beginning of the 90s, and it all sort of started to take off. And then I had my first taste of Formula First, which was quite the machine.
We were talking about this before the podcast, because you guys have both had a taste of that, and in a long-winded kind of tenuous way. I have as well, because Cadwell Park used to host Formula First. About the first time we've credibly got Cadwell into the podcast, isn't it, talking to Formula One drivers and the like.
Yeah.
Well, I remember Formula First, because Formula First was kind of like when you came out of karts, it was all about Formula Ford and the Formula Ford Festival. That was what you did. And I don't think any of us really knew much about Formula First, but Ollie had kind of moved into Formula First with Fortec, and was just kind of dominating it, like winning all these races, and was getting some real momentum, kind of like, you're kind of getting a lot of momentum, a lot of accolades. And then I think you did the Formula Ford Festival with Swift. I remember it being like a red Swift.
Yeah.
And you had like a mega, I think it was like Jamie Spence, and I don't know who won it that year, actually. Who was it that won it that year?
Goosens. I think Goosens won it.
That's right, yeah, in the Van Diemen. I remember you as Swift, so you had Van Diemen versus Swift back then.
Yeah, yeah.
Real rivalry. And I remember watching that race because it was just before my first race. And you obviously, did a fantastic job. I don't know where you finished in the end.
I think I finished 5th that year. I wasn't quite. I mean, I think I did a reasonable job in the heats and the final, in the semi-final, and then I got into the final, and I just didn't quite have enough pace, and the Swift then was just not. It didn't quite have it against the Van Diemen. But then I came back the next year, and I had a great race against Jan Magnussen.
Yeah.
He and I had a big old battle.
So most people will know what a Formula Ford is listening, but they might not know what a Formula First is that we touched on briefly. So
it's like a brick.
Could enlighten them.
It's a brick.
Why don't you see them anymore? You never see them at historic shows or
it's funny
hill
that.
climbs. Yeah.
It's not massively. It's quite phallic because it's not that dissimilar to like a sort of like a delta wing. You know, it's quite wide at the back. You know, a bit of a narrow point. No wings on it.
Yeah.
What was it? XR3i engine in it that had in it
mounted across the car.
Yeah,
and
big car like car type mirrors on it.
Yeah.
And a rear body.
Massive toes, huge.
Well, that rear bodywork used to flip up, didn't it? Like
and then just disappear.
Yeah.
Oh, ridiculous.
It had a sort of funny kind of shape at the top, a bit like the McLaren MP410 that Mark Blundell drove. You know, weird kind of.
Yeah, but didn't really sort of. It was supposed to be sort of some sort of scoop, but I don't think it really did anything at all.
Yeah. I'll find a picture. I'll find a picture and we'll put it on the Instagram. Because for those who haven't seen one, it's a weird looking thing.
Yeah, so many things on that car didn't really work that well. The gearbox.
It was on the treaded tires, and actually the racing, like Ollie said, you used to get a real good toe. So actually the racing was pretty. You can never, hard to break the toe. So the racing was
mad.
It's probably the nearest thing you get to like Ginetta Juniors now, where it's quite a basic car. And the racing was good. And I guess as a kartie, you know, the fact that you sat in a racing car, it felt special.
Oh yeah.
But that soon wore off, you know, once you got into sort of.
I think the very first time I tested one was at Snetterton, and I'd done about, I don't know, 3 or 4 laps, and I was just really trying to get into the whole thing of being in a single seater. You know, so used to being in a car, but having all of that vision. And it was all seeming so open, and then all of a sudden you're in this little single seater, and it's slow, it's big, and then it was an open test day, and I just come out onto the main sort of back straight, and a 3000 car came past me, Formula 3000 car, and it just shook the whole car, and I had to pit. I was just so shaken up, I didn't know what to do. So yeah, there were.
You look in your mirror, don't you? You look in your mirror, and there's nothing there. Just to get to the braking zone, you look in your mirror, there's nothing there. And then next thing you know, out of nowhere,
it's the 3000 car. I think it was, I don't know.
That was what, early 1990s. And by the mid 1990s, you were driving DTM, testing Formula One cars.
Yeah.
That was quite a meteoric step up the ladder, wasn't it?
Driving those 3000 cars, weren't you? You know, you were.
Yeah, I suppose I was. And it got to the point where, I'd had sort of quite a good number of steps, had a little bit of a misstep, sort of 94, and that was in 3000, and I went back to F3 in 95 and won the championship in that, and that was Edenbridge Racing. We beat the mighty Paul Stewart Racing, and that was a great season, and that was really this sort of the launching pad really for really what I've gone on to do. You know, it enabled me, got me on the map. It enabled me to sort of have some good credibility, I suppose. And went on to doing ITC or DTM, whichever you want to call it, and had a fun season in that for Opel. Didn't exactly go completely to plan, and then ITC sort of folded, and Opel sort of pulled the plug on it, and it morphed into something else.
And that was an iconic era to have raced any kind of touring car, whether it was German, English, or whatever, because touring was big, and those Calibras were just monstrous things. Anyone who's had a Tamiya model as a kid would know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun to drive. Extraordinary cars, 4-wheel drive, great power, ABS, a lot of little tricks on them, and the racing.
The noise.
Yeah, great noise. 13,000 RPM, I think it was. Air valves. Actually, the guy that designed the engine, that Cosworth engine, he now lives in my village.
Really?
Yeah.
I bet you guys are
John
the
Hilton.
life and soul of the party when you go to the pub, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about those DCM days again. So where does the Formula One test fit into that? And we apologise and don't apologise at the same time that we don't go through a chronological order of anyone's career on this podcast. It's more the stories.
Yeah, sure.
The Pacific Formula One team I remember when I was a kid, but you did get as far as testing the car, didn't you? Where did that fit into this picture of F3, DTM?
Okay, so we're talking about the Pacific Pacific Grand Prix and
Yep.
me trying to drive at Adelaide at the end of 1995. So so we'd had a relationship with Pacific Grand Prix through 94 and 95, and some sponsorship had gone over to the team. And in fact, Pacific was supposed to run me in 3000 in 94, and that never happened. And so I went to Amiga Land, it fell to bits, didn't work. I then went back to Edenbridge and did 95 in Formula 3, won the championship, got a super license, or I was eligible for a super license.
Yep.
And so Keith Wiggins, who was running Pacific Grand Prix at the time, said, okay, Oliver, in return for the sponsorship that you put into the team, we will put you in the car for the final race at Adelaide in 95, final Formula 1 Grand Prix.
Wow.
So I went down to, I flew down there with Ian Dawson, the team manager, got there, was being fitted in the car, met all the boys, been fitted in the car, met Murray Walker, had a big interview with him, and it was all going great. And then the next day I've come back to the track and I'm sitting in the car again, just doing the final stuff with the mirrors. And I look in the mirror and all the boys have just left the garage. And I can see Keith Wiggins is in the background, in the back of the garage, and Bertrand Gachot is there. And I was due to be replacing Bertrand. He was supposed to have had a water ski accident and broken his leg. And so he wasn't going to be eligible for that race. But then as he turns up in the garage, he's obviously there. He's clearly not taking a sabbatical from that final race. And so Keith sort of says, you need to get out of the car. I go to the back of the garage. We have this long chat, and Keith said, look, that's it. You're not going to be able to drive. You're not going to be able to compete this weekend at Adelaide because your super license hasn't come through. And I thought, this is a load of crap,
Yeah.
And it was a way of them getting me out of the car. So I went down to see Bernie and waited outside his office for about an hour and a half, and eventually came out and he said, look, Oliver, we're looking at this clearly, that you've not tested this car before. And I hadn't driven the 95 car. I'd driven the 94 car for 10 laps in the rain at Snetterton with Formula 3000 suspension on the left-hand side and F1 suspension on the right-hand side. So it wasn't exactly a great, grounding. And I'd never raced at Adelaide before, and I'd never raced in a Formula 1 race before.
Yeah.
And so he gave me all three of those points, and I couldn't argue. And, what can you say? And it's Bernie, and he's sort of standing there, and he's quite intimidating. And he said, and to go with all of that, Oliver, we can't get your super license now. So we'd love to have you back. We'd love to have you on the grid, but Pacific Grand Prix going out of business. They're done at the end of the year. So you're going to need to find another opportunity. And and with that, he just sort of turned and then he walked away. And I thought,
that's
well,
brutal.
It was pretty brutal, but it's Formula 1, isn't it? And it's, there are so many other drivers who've had almost exactly the same story. You could, and you realize that, okay, to get into it is hard enough to then, but then you do a race or any amount of races in it that you can get pitched at any time. And it's absolutely dog eat dog, ruthless business.
I've always wondered about the super license thing because there was an issue recently when Sebastian Loeb was due to test a car and he tested it. And then again, supposedly his super license didn't come through. And it always, from an outside, total observer point of view, without any inside knowledge whatsoever, it always seems like it's just shrouded in politics. And you've kind of confirmed it for me there that they can use the super license in whichever way they want. Yeah,
it's a bit sort of like they hide behind it, I think. And I'm sure it's become a far more sort of there's far more to it now, and you can actually sort of see through or get to know what the rungs are or the criteria are to get it and to see how it works. But back then, Bernie had control of it, and he was like,
did
this
that
guy
just
can race.
feel stood at that door like that was, I don't know, a career-defining moment? It turned out not to be, luckily, but did it feel like that was just a world-crashing down moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was standing there thinking, well, what the fuck do I do now? And I had to then leave the track to go and pick my father up from the airport. He had just been flying down through the night from the UK down there, flying into Adelaide. Went and picked him up from the airport, and I sort of gave him the news as we walked to the car, and he was just furious. I mean, again, as any dad would be, or any big supporter of their son, and yeah, we then drove to a hotel. Keith was there. He and my father and Keith had this big meeting and pretty huge row. and that was it. And at that point, we realised that Keith really wasn't in control of the team anymore. You know, that other stuff had taken over, and that the wheels were falling off, and that was the end of the road for Pacific. So, yeah, a bit of a brutal end, but it's not the end of the story of my relationship with Keith, because of some 5 years later, he gives me the opportunity for my very first race in the US and gets me into sports car racing in the US, which is, yeah.
Came through Keith did it.
Say again?
It came through Keith did it, the intro to the US.
Yeah, so Keith was, he was a sales director at Lola in 99 and 2000, and I was looking to do something in sports cars in the US in 2000. And so I went to Keith and I said, I need to get myself in one of these cars. There was a Homestead Grand Am race, and he'd got a couple of B2K10s in the, or one B2K10 in the race, and there was a 9810 Lola in the race as well. So the B2K10 was run by a guy called Scott Schubert, and Phil Crichton was running the car, and John Field was driving the 9810. And so John's whole philosophy, Keith's whole philosophy for getting me into the car was to show that the B2K10 was a fast car, because he was trying to sell it to John Field. And so I get there to Homestead, but I have to take some money, and I take all of our savings. So Helen is pregnant with my wife. My wife is pregnant with our daughter Lily, and I say to her, look, I've got this opportunity to race at Homestead, and but it's going to cost us some money. I'm just going to take all our savings. And she went, oh, okay then, sure. So she had this pregnant brain, she said. Pregnant brain, and they're just like, yeah, okay, all right, yeah, take the money, off you go. So I took all the money, and I went to Homestead. I handed it all over to Scott Schubert and his load of B2K10, and he sort of like walked out the back of the garage with it. And I just thought, well, okay, well, that's that. I'm going to get to drive the car now, but there's no guarantees of anything. And fortunately, qualified well, raced pretty well, had a massive wheel banging competition with this guy called Jack Baldwin, who's huge, and it's like a gorilla.
Yeah.
And I gave him a puncher. This must be about lap 15 in the race. Gave him a puncher. He comes around, goes into the pits, changes tires, comes back out and just waits for me. And I come around to lap him, and I know what he's waiting for. And we come out onto the back straight, and he just gives me this massive side swipe, gives me a puncher, breaks the nose off the car. I come in, pit, Scott Schubert jumps in, change tires, car goes out again. And I jump out, and I'm like, jumping up and down, sort of saying to Phil Crichton, who's running the car, you know, who's this guy, Jack Baldwin? And he points to him, and he's this massive guy, and he's running down the pit lane towards me. And I run off into the truck and hide. I don't want to fight him. Yeah, so it wasn't until about a year later that I finally, Jack Baldwin caught up with me in a elevator in Three Rivers, and the two of us were in the elevator on our own, and he had me by the throat.
What, a year later?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
My God, talk about not holding a grudge.
Yeah, he said to me, "Don't ever do that again." And wow. I knew exactly what he was talking about, and I didn't. But ever since that point, we've been as good as gold. Oh, so he made his point, and that was it. So
did John Field buy the car?
He did. John bought the car, and then I ended up going to drive for John. And the first time I drove with John, I had to pay to get there. Yeah. But I didn't have to bring him any money.
Right.
And then the next race, John said, "Look, I'll help you out with your airfare, but I still won't pay you any money." And it went on for like that for a few races, and then finally, he said, "Right, I'll pay you a little bit of money, and I'll pay you all your expenses." And that's kind of how I got going with him.
Yeah.
And then that led to the Celine deal, and then, you know, it just was step by step by step.
It's like anything, is it? It's all about getting momentum, isn't it? It's all about, you know, it's going to America. First of all, you got to kind of, you know, show your worth, show what you can do. So people don't really know anything about Brits when they go over. So it's all about kind of show what you can do, isn't it? And then build those relationships. And that's obviously what you've done. You've gone to John, you know, and then you got the Celine opportunity. By being in the Celine, you're under the nose of, you know, Pratt and Miller guys, which means, you know, which then gives you the opportunity, I guess, then to go to Corvette. So when you moved to the Celine, then was that with Borchella? Who were you driving with?
Yeah,
Borchella. Okay.
So the Celine deal, that sort of all came about sort of a little bit last minute, but it was the car was being done by put together by RML, Ray Mallet Limited, and a couple of great designers there and great people. And that car was really fantastic for its time. It was a really great car, and I loved driving it. And the first time
looking thing as well, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it looked so good.
Yeah. And the first time I competed in it was Sebring, and I was driving with Franz Conrad and Terry Borchella, and nobody gave us a chance. Nobody. And Sebring's brutal. I mean, it's a real car breaker.
Yeah.
12 hours. It's just a monster of a race. And we were racing against Corvette, and Corvette sort of had an eye on us, but I think that they always just thought that we were going to break and we were going to be done. But we qualified on pole. Franz started the race because he said that he was the guy that to be trusted to start the race.
Yeah.
Well, 5 laps in, the rear deck's hanging off. He's hit someone. And so we've got no spares. And he's driving around and the radio doesn't work properly. And the rear deck is hanging off the car, and it's only attached by one bracket, one. And if it goes, we're done, out of the race, finished, no spares. Somehow we managed to get hold of him, get him into the pit lane. Well, he's already radioed through that he wants certain things ready to go. So the car comes into the pit, and Terry and I are sitting there wondering how this is going to work. The doors open already before the car stopped. Franz has jumped out of the car himself. He's grabbed everything off the side of the pit wall, and he's fixed the car himself. He wouldn't let anyone else touch it. He's done the whole thing all on his own. He's then jumped back in, they've refueled it, and off he's gone. He just carried on. It was just like, that's how it works.
Just normal. Wow.
Yeah, just normal. Well, we kept going and kept going. We got ourselves in the lead, and then one of the Corvettes broke, and then the other car had a bit of a problem, but we were leading on pace anyway. And I remember the very final stop I came in for, I thought I was getting out of the car. And as I've come into the pit box, I've undone the belts and I've gone to open the door, and I've looked, and Terry is standing there in his civvies, and so's Franz. So I'm finishing, but they hadn't told me on the radio. So I've then had to do all the belts back up again. But just past them, I can still see, as the car's being fueled, I can see 2 people sitting on the pit wall, and that's Doug Feehan and Gary Pratt. And they're watching the final stop, and they're knowing that if that works for us, the Selena's won. And, it was an amazing victory and a great result for a tiny little team up against, it was a real David and Goliath job. But that really put me on the map with Corvette. And it was about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months later that I was on the podium at Watkins Glen driving with John Field again. And it was the NASCAR weekend where, we'd race on the Saturday or the Friday or the Saturday. I can't remember exactly which day it was. But the trophies were being given out at the end of the race by Ron Fellows. And so Ron comes over to me with the trophy, hands it to me, and then says, "Ollie, have you got just a second after the ceremony? I've just got a couple of things I wanted to sort of discuss." I went, "Okay, great." So jumped off the podium after the champagne and go around the back of the podium. And Ron says, "Look, looks like we've got an opportunity next year as a third driver on the team. Would you be interested in joining us on the 63 car or the 3 car to drive with Johnny and I?" I was like, "Yeah, I think that sounds a great idea." And he says, "Well, give this guy a call, Doug Feehan." Yeah. And so I did once I got home. And I met him then later on that year at Laguna Seca, driving for John again. And then I tested the car, the Corvette, for the first time in November of 2001. And then it all finished at November of 2020.
This is where it gets fascinating for me when I look at these sort of deals, because you guys as racing drivers are always talking about, well, I did this deal with this person. And in racing, there's so many deals where drivers get their drives, and it's who you know, and it's the relationships and partnerships you've garnered over the years. But when you're talking about probably the most fiercely defended brand in America, Corvette, did you realize what you were taking on as a Brit? Going to be,
No.
the name they were chucking out there for, their hallowed Corvette brand.
No, not at all. And it's over all of the years I've recognized and realized just the sort of responsibility that I had, with the brand, the name, the reputation that the car had, and what it's built in the racing world, the team itself, the success it's had. It really is a force to be reckoned with. Back when I joined the team, they were just cutting their teeth really as being this sort of leading force in GT racing. But they've just grown and grown and grown. I think there was most probably 30 people, 35 people in the team or in the operation when I joined. I think there's now over 350 people there.
Wow.
And just five words that are on the back of a trophy, which you put on your Instagram: racer, champion, teammate, leader, friend. Again, one of the biggest brands in America. British driver, the most successful driver for the Corvette Racing, and they hand you a trophy like that as you lead the team. That's a pretty good achievement.
It was pretty amazing. I can't. There's so many stories, so many memories, so many great experiences, so many great races. I've got that trophy sitting on the desk here, just looking at it now. And
you're gonna hold that up for the camera, right?
Yeah, I'll get it for you. Here we go. So
fantastic. And on the back of those words that I just read out on there.
Yeah.
Ah, brilliant.
Yeah, and it's they've been a phenomenal team and a great group of people. You develop such fantastic relationships with so many people, and I suppose that's so much of the business, isn't it? It's the people that you work with, those special moments that you have, those relationships you develop, and then you go on and you have some really, maybe some bad races or things don't quite work out, and then it starts to go and you start to see the upswing in things and you start to have that success, and then you really get on the bit of a crest of a wave and you start winning a championship, and then you start winning big races, and it's just that feeling you get from working from that group, with that group of guys, and that real team feeling. It's a phenomenal thing, and I've been very, very fortunate.
We had a question on Instagram from Josh Barrett, who's a British commentator on Club Racing. He says you drove lots of versions of the Corvette. Which one was your favourite? Do you have one?
Well, I mean, the current car is amazing. I mean, that's the finest handling Corvette that I think I've ever raced. But in terms of sheer experience and power and pace and downforce and feel and just all-round massive grin on your face, it's got to be the C6R GT1 cars that we raced when we competed against Aston Martin. Those things were just monstrous. That sort of era and time, sort of 2005, 6, 7, 8. Those races that we had against Pro Drive Aston Martin were just phenomenal. Real, you always look back on those points, and I know you must be the same with this guy. You sort of look back on periods in your racing career and you go, God, that was just such mega racing, brilliant cars, brilliant people, great racing, and I just love that period.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good time. I think particularly for the ALMS, or the ALMS days were really, really great. A great time.
Yeah.
For racing in the US. I mean, I think you were a little bit like us in LMP1. Didn't always have the numbers, but the competition was really, really strong. So that it didn't really matter in the US. You didn't have to have 20 cars. If you had 3 or 4 cars, but particularly, I know particularly in your class as well. The competition between you guys and BMW and Ferrari with Risi and stuff, the competition was always so intense and so tight, so tight. So yeah, definitely really made for great racing. So Ollie, did you ever have were you ever tempted to leave Corvette, or was there ever a time where you thought, I'd like to look at doing something different or go elsewhere, or were you always kind of fully committed in there?
Well, there was a couple of periods where some different people approached me and talked to me about different things and different opportunities. And, I think at the time when Andy Prio was being lined up for the BMW gig, I got contacted by by those guys about whether I'll go there, but my time had only really just started with Corvette, and I was happy with where I was. I really could sort of see that there was going to be a long-term future there, and you know, I also had some conversations with Rob Dyson and when James was leaving, James Weaver, and you know, Rob was talking to me then about that, and again, you know, I could sort of, as much as I enjoyed that atmosphere that was at Dyson Racing and the way that Rob ran it and all the other people there, I could still see that Corvette, the longevity of the program, I was hoping, and the fact that it was a manufacturer backed operation, and they looked like they had a very long-term plan.
Yeah, because you see with manufacturers now, I mean, normally they come in, they do 3 or 4 years, and then, you know, then there's a board change or whatever else, and they go out, and then somebody else comes in, and then it moves around. So you think, if I got 3 or 4 years out of it, I've done quite well. But and I think you know, for you to be there, I mean, you know, you can't underestimate as a driver the fact that you stayed there wasn't accident. You know, you have to every year you have to earn your place, don't you? Because there's always drivers, you know, wanting your seat. So you've got to, while you might feel fairly secure because you know that people like and respect you, you still got to perform, because as soon as you don't start performing, people are kind of, you know, the vultures start circling. So you can't underestimate what what you've had to do, and you know, to politically, you've got to work, you know, you've got, in a big organization, you've got to be able to work with, you know, the management, with the big bosses at GM, haven't you? And you've got to be able to, you've got to work all the angles. You know, the driving bit is sort of the easy bit, isn't it? It's all the other stuff that goes around it.
Yeah, that's it. It is a bit like that, and you know, when you sort of see the drivers who've come and gone, and then you sort of see also the way that the bosses come and go. But then you know, someone like Doug Feehan, when I first started at the team, you know, he was nice, but he was also keeping you on 1-year deals every year. There was nothing any more than that. And so it kept you honest and kept you really on it. And you know, you knew all the time that you were being assessed. And you know, as I've gone through my career at Corvette, that's only increased. And because they've got more ways of analyzing you, they've got every single last little bit of data, and you know, they're just sitting there assessing it all and going, okay, well, we know this guy's particularly good on this track, or this guy's particularly good here, or he had a bit of a dip here, or that didn't quite work out, and you know, we've got to sort of think about, you know, what about in these conditions he didn't seem to enjoy that, or he was very good at this spot. You know, they've got ways of just picking all that information out, and so there's nowhere to hide.
No, and you had some really good teammates as well. I mean, you know, you look at, you know, Magnussen, Garcia, you know, obviously now, you know, the younger kids, Jordan and stuff coming up. I mean, some really, really quick, you know, competitive teammates, which of course they keep you on your toes as well, because, you know, that the best way to compare yourself is against your teammates always. So it's a good yardstick. But I mean, obviously, you know, you've done amazing well. I think one thing we've talked about a lot in the podcast with different people is, we talk about careers and what it takes to be a professional driver and successful. And it always comes down ultimately to hard work and how much you want it. I mean, I speak a lot with the young drivers now, and they all sort of say to me, what advice can you give? And, you know, in some respects, the driving is the easy bit. That's a given, because once you're a factory driver, you're expected to be quick.
Yeah.
It's been able to be motivated, be a leader. And, you know, I know that you do, like with your training. I mean, you're relentless in your training. I mean, I follow you on Strava, and it's insane what you do. But you've got to have that. You've got to have that determination and that drive in order to succeed. And also for you as well. I mean, I've had it to a certain degree, but in order to have a career as long as you've had, you know, as you've got older, you're probably just as fit, if not fitter, than most of the kids that are 16, 17 years old now.
Just tell us what is amazing in Strava world for you guys, because I know you cycle extraordinary lengths as well. So
he makes me look like a Sunday afternooner. I mean, it's insane.
Give us some numbers.
Well, Ollie was always an amazing runner. I mean, you know, he's got long skinny legs, but he's always a fantastic runner. You know, used to do, you know, really, really quick. I mean, what marathons? What about like less than 3 hours? Do you think you
Yeah, I've done 2 marathons under 3 hours. I've done 2 hours 54 at the marathon, and I did that was 2010 and 2012. And I think Jensen is, I think, the only one who's gone quicker. Jensen did like 2:45, which he murdered me. And I always thought about going back and see if I could do another marathon, because I did like to have that little feather in the cap of being, the fastest driver at running a marathon. But weirdly, but yeah, Jensen just set the benchmark way too high, and I can't reach that now. I'm too old.
But now you kind of gone more towards cycling. I mean, obviously cycling is a big thing for a lot of drivers.
Yeah.
Have switched to cycling, not just because it's more of a social. A lot more drivers are doing it, and
yeah.
I know that do you take your bike with you, or do you have one out?
I have done in the past, and in fact, this last year I took my bike with me, and it's the first time I've really taken a tumble. This year when I was on the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina. And I thought I'll just go up and I'll just ride the Blue Ridge Parkway. Lovely views, all the trees are turning, all the lovely colors. But then, of course, there's lots of traffic, lots of people on the road. And I just ended up trying to keep out the way of a particular car. And I ended up going off the road. And then I came back on the road, and then I flew off my bike and took a big tumble, broke a rib. Yeah, broke a rib. Yeah, which I then, because that was the week leading up to Petit Le Mans.
Right.
And I then realized how miserable driving around Atlanta was with a broken rib.
Wow.
And that was not fun.
I remember following on Strava and Instagram, and there's Ollie's gone to America for 3 months because of lockdown. We're all in lockdown. Ollie's there on his bike, in the sunshine. He's like, yeah, just meeting Antonio for a coffee. Then I'm going for a 5-hour bike ride, and we're all sort of sat in freezing cold England, locked up. And I'm not jealous at all. But but no, the fact is that obviously you're still very motivated from a fitness point of view. You've got to have that kind of that drive and motivation. So when you wake up, I mean, I get up and train first thing in the morning. It's just, what I like to do. And
yeah,
you have that mindset that you just do it. You don't put it off. It's having that drive to get up and do it. And even if you're not racing, you still have that mindset of, I want to get up and do it because I want to feel good. I want to,
yeah.
Got that drive.
It's that discipline.
Yeah.
And I always sort of thought, with the sort of sport that we're in, Guy, we're endurance racing, we're in sports cars, and I need to go off and I need to sort of test myself every now and again on a bike or a run, because I know that at periods I'm going to be driving the car for that amount of time, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and I need to just put myself into that window and exercise and push myself to sort of see how I'm going to deal with it, and to see how I feel, and see how I'm going to cope physically. And also I use it as a way of somewhat getting myself away from some of the stress of whatever we're doing, or sometimes to actually get myself into the zone of what I need to be doing for the race that's coming up. And I've used training over all of the years to help me de-stress, but then also to ramp myself up and get myself in the zone.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's good that you do that and continue to do that. I didn't know you broken the rib zone. I remember reading on Strava back on the back first ride since my tumble, but I didn't realize it was actually.
Yeah. I definitely gave the team a bit of a scare. I gave myself a bit of a scare because I crashed at about 25, 30 miles an hour. And, the car behind fortunately managed to stop and didn't run me over, but my bike went across the other side of the road. And I mean, it was a big shunt, and get taken off into the hospital. And you all these things are rushing through your mind, and you're trying to phone your wife, and then you're trying to phone your boss to tell him the position that you're in. And there's only 4 or 5 days leading up to Petit Le Mans, and then he's starting to sort of think, okay, do we need to get somebody in to sub for you, or how much can you do, and who can we get to try and sort of make you right and fix you up? And so managed to find a lady that looks after some of the Atlanta Falcons football players.
Oh, really?
And she started to work some magic on me, and she actually most probably was one of the main reasons why I managed to get myself in the car to do as little as I did, and managed to score points so that I wasn't out of the championship, let's say.
Yeah.
So did you know that the Corvette run was coming to an end last year? Was that something you had already planned and were sort of quite comfortable with?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that things were going to be winding down for me, and that it was going to be my last year of full time. You know, there was some stuff sort of going on in the background that I thought, okay, am I going to carry on in a third driver role, or and then I realized that wasn't going to happen. And so then the decision was sort of taken that I was going to continue with aligning myself with the brand and with Corvette, and I'm going to continue to do some stuff with them on the road.
I saw that you had a very nice one over here in the UK, and you were giving it a bit of a wash down the other day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the C7 Z06, yep. But the C8, the new car, the mid-engine car, is going to be coming to this country towards the end of the year. So we're going to finally get a right-hand drive Corvette, first time ever.
Fantastic.
And so yeah, I should be able to get my hands on one of those in 4 or 5 months' time. But yeah, there's some exciting plans coming that I'll be able to start talking about in about 3 or 4 months' time.
We had a scoop earlier today, of course, with Lexus and going back and trying to do the business again at the Rolex.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that's going to be a lot of fun to go there with Vass Sullivan, and you know, there with a great team. You know, the 14 car and the Lexus, and GTD is going to be immense. You know, that whole class is just
tough, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just brutal, and nowhere to hide in that, but it's going to be a lot of fun.
Did that come out of nowhere then, or was that something you've been kind of nurturing?
Well, no, it's a bit of a strange story to that. I mean, I was final race Sebring in the Vette, and it seemed that every time I got in the car there was something that just wasn't quite right, and I got in the car in the race, and I'm only about 5 laps in, and I'm coming down to turn 17, and I can smell coolant. I'm thinking, this isn't right. And I look in the rearview mirror, a camera, and I can see that it's all just misted. And the rad's just had this massive dump. It's just cracked a fitting, and all the water's just dumped out. So it's all over the rear wheels, and I'm trying to stop the thing, trying to stop it. I'm fighting it all the way in, and I just like right up against the tire wall, just skim it and then get it back into the pits. But there's 3 or 4 cars behind. Don't stand a chance. And the two of those cars were the 2 Lexus, the 2 Lexus cars, and they were fighting for the championship. And they spin out in the wall, out of the race, done, finished, over. That was it. So after the race, I've messaged Jack Hawksworth, who's a British driver. He's there. Yeah, and he's a great lad. And I had a couple of chats with him, and we've sort of been talking over the last couple of years. And I just messaged him and said, look, I'm so sorry about that. You know, it's just such a terrible way for you guys to go out. Really, you know, feel so bad for you guys. And you know, and he was really gracious. He sort of said, look, Ollie, just racing, it happens. And you know, just one of those deals. And then about a week later, he messages me again, and he goes, what are you doing? What are you doing for Daytona? And I went, I'm not doing anything really, I don't think. And he said, well, why don't you give these guys a call? Why don't you give Sully and Jimmy Vassar a call and see if we can get you in the car? Because I think there's an opportunity. And yeah, so just got talking with those guys. Other stuff sort of lined up. And I shared it all with the guys at GM, and they said, look, you know, we're not quite ready to go with all the stuff that we're going to be doing with you, Ollie. So yeah, absolutely, go ahead. If this keeps you current and keeps you in a car, and it's a great opportunity. It's a strong car. They've genuinely got a good chance in the class. And, you know, so I was like, yeah, absolutely. So all in. And
I love that. You started the conversation by taking their 2 lead cars out of the race.
Inadvertently. Yeah. And so once I called Jimmy up and Sully, there was a bit of an awkward conversation about, you know, so what happened at Sebring? And I'm like, I'm really sorry, guys. That was really awkward. And, you know,
good icebreaker though, Lolly. I mean, at the end of the day, if it was a cold call, you might have not had the success, but the fact that you kind of, you know, it's an icebreaker, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it is. I don't know that they're going to give me lots of shit about it, you know, once I get to the racetrack, you know, and the boys working hard on fixing those cars. But yeah, the 14 car's got a new chassis, so I don't know whether that was through the accident or not, or whether it was planned or not, but looks like we've got a good car for Daytona, so great news.
So do you think you're going to do any more with them, or have you any sort of, or should I say, have you any plans to do any more racing this year, or how are you doing it?
So I think the Lexus thing will be a one-off. It'll just be Daytona only. because Aaron and Kirk are going to be in the car for the other races.
Yeah.
With Jack. So I'll yeah, there's a couple other races that I am going to do, but I can't talk about them. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yes, it's
In the US, in the US, Ollie.
Yeah, one of them will be in the US, and so yeah, it's going to be it's going to be an interesting year. It's going to be a fun year. It's going to be definitely a transition year.
Yeah.
And I've got so used to racing in the US.
Yeah.
So used to competing full time in IMSA, and so yes, it is going to be odd. And this sort of wind down from full time racing and just picking up bits and pieces here and there.
It's been hard managing the kind of personal life balance with having your life in the UK, but then racing in the US.
Yes, it has, and my wife would attest to that. She actually said over the last couple of months that she feels that she's really got me back. When I was racing full time,
as well as those savings that you took.
I thought you were going to say, your wife was going to say, when are you going back racing again?
Yeah, so we're going through this honeymoon period at the moment of me finishing my racing. So maybe actually Daytona is coming just about at the right time for me to leave again. But no, she's sort of saying that I think I was so sort of focused on my racing when I was full time at Corvette that I really had very little time to think about anything else. I was just so laser sort of focused on it and driven by it that trying to think of most other stuff just didn't always come on the radar. And now I am going to have way more time for the kids' birthdays and the things just to do as a family. Not that I didn't do those things before, but it's just the balance is going to be a little bit better.
I noticed on Strava, those 70-mile bike rides are now 2-mile walks. I mean,
romantic ones.
Exactly.
Talk about wind down, but but now you've announced your Daytona deal. I'm expecting the Strava to pick up a bit.
Yeah, don't worry, it will.
So we touched on the Formula One with Pacific, and I noticed there were some photos of you in, was it Alonso's Renault? Were you testing for Renault at some point?
Yeah. So that all came about through a contact and a mate that I developed got to know this guy called Nigel Clyde. He was an engineer for Mercedes, and I think he was actually Dario's engineer or Dario's engineer at one point for Mercedes in DTM. And Nigel moved from Mercedes. He went to Benetton, and I had a spell where I was driving the safety car at F1 Grand Prix, and that started midway through '97. Charlie Whiting gave me the job, by the way. And Charlie was such a great guy, fantastic man.
I didn't know you drove the safety car at F1.
Yeah, I did.
I missed that off my
yeah. So I was, and again, that was a sort of a job that I ended up getting through Peter Briggs, who ran Edenbridge Racing, who I won for in 1995. Peter had worked with Charlie Whiting and knew Charlie from his old F1 days. And so Charlie got me the job driving the safety car.
What was the safety car? Was it a CLK? What?
Yeah, it was a CLK, Merck CLK, and a lot of fun. And so I've been driving the Mercedes safety car at the Japanese Grand Prix, and I just got home, and Nigel calls me the next day, and I was like, I hadn't heard from Nigel for ages, and he said, look, Ollie, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, I don't know, nothing. I'm just recovering from jet lag. And he said, well, why don't you get yourself up to Silverstone? He says, because you and Alexander Wirtz are about the same size, aren't you? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, he's our test driver at the moment for Benetton. And Nigel was one of the engineers of the test team. And he said, well, Alexander's still out in Japan doing some PR work for Mile 7. And also the race drivers are. He says, so we've got nobody to drive the car. And we've got a sponsor that we've got on the hook, and we want to just finish the deal. And it's FedEx, and we're going to put FedEx down the side pod, and we just want you to drive the car for 10 laps around Silverstone. Do you think you can do it? Of course I can. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be there first thing. So I get there, jump in the car. The seat fits like a glove. Alexander and I have got about exactly the same body. And did 10 laps. FedEx were happy. The Benetton guys were happy. They're happy with what I was doing. And they said, well, why don't you do some more? We'll do some more laps. And I did the rest of the day. And at the end of the day, they said, right, okay, this is how much we're going to pay you. And I was like, oh, okay, then great. And they paid me for the day. And then they said, we're going to do 2 more days. And so I did 3 full days, which was a bit tough on the neck. But fortunately, most of it was wet because it was sort of, November time. and from then onwards, off and on, from 97 through to 2006, I did a load of work for Benetton and then Renault. So I got to know Pat Simmons really well, and you know, some other guys there, Carlos Nunes, Gordon Pocock, a whole raft of people that were brilliant guys, and developed a good relationship with them. And so I did shakedowns for them, aero work for them, and then we did a load of start work. I did a load of start work for them.
In the days when you weren't limited to the tests, of course.
No, I mean, I think one year, I think I must have done about 80 days at Santa Pod. Wow. 80. It was just ridiculous.
So you very flippantly kind of brushed off the fact that your neck hurt a little bit after a couple of days, but although you were match fit and already racing and driving the safety car, that must have been just a seismic shock jumping in a Formula One car, surely.
Yeah, extraordinary. And you know, it's one of the things that you just, it's sort of like you have to sort of almost speed your brain up. You just have to uprate your processor. You have to just start getting your thinking just up to that next level. And for just amazing cars, just extraordinary to drive, just the whole world of Formula One and testing those cars was just a massive eye-opener for me. And I was, for those first 3 days, I was just walking around with eyes as big as saucers and just thinking, this is just amazing experience. And the fact that they paid me, I was just like, well, this is amazing.
No pressure either. You haven't got the pressure of, you know, having to keep your race seat or anything. You just get to have a go in the car.
Yeah. And you know, that was the sort of the beauty with a lot of the work that I did with Benetton and Renault. And yeah, I had a great time with them, and those guys were really loyal, and I just did a job for them. And yeah, as you say, that just with there being no ban on testing, or there's no limit to it, you know, the test team really was a big team of people. And you know, if you were a test driver, you genuinely were a test driver.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Guy, do you remember when McLaren used to test near us at Elvington? You used to have
yeah,
was it Pedro De La Rosa used to go straight line testing down? I remember doing a sprint in my little XR2. There's a McLaren Formula One car on the next airfield.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's changed a bit. They don't kind of do that anymore, do they? They don't kind of use these airfields the same way. But yeah, no, it's yeah, no, that's great. I didn't actually know you'd done that much work with in the Renault Ollie, actually.
No, it was a lot of fun. It was great to do, and I worked with some really smart people.
Yeah.
You know, the start stuff that I did, there was 3 guys. One chap had come from Ferrari, this Gordon Pocock, who is a brilliant whiz with the electronics, and then there's another guy called Naoki. I think a chap had come from Nissan, and those three were absolutely amazing with the start system and how it worked, and how just to get a car off the line, and you know, the physics behind it, and getting everything meshed together. And they got it working so well that they knew that wherever they started on the grid, that by turn 1 there'd be at least the next row forward, if not further. It was worth 2, if not 3 or 4 grid positions every single time. And I think that was like that for a good season. Yeah. And so it's definitely, all that work was definitely paid off, and it's fascinating to do.
Yeah, you've just triggered something in my mind. Actually, you posted on the day that Romain Grosjean had that big accident at the end of last season, and actually, having driven the safety car, that must have had a whole different perspective for you watching all that unfold.
Yeah, and you know, immediately my mind just went to Charlie Whiting and Sid Watkins, and you know, all of the work that those two did in particular to really improve safety. Some of the stuff that the guys were doing and they were thinking about, it was always in the forefront of their mind. You know, whereas, you know, I was still relatively young when I drove the safety car and I did all of that work, and I was just wanting to race and compete, and I didn't see half the danger. But you know, Sid and Charlie had, you know, and even Herbie Blash, you know, they'd seen so many people killed through all of that very dark period, you know, of the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, and you know, so they had that in the forefront of their mind, whereas, you know, I was sort of coming into it, and I couldn't quite always get why they were so laser focused on it. And then you go and see something like what happened with Romain,
and
you go, well, that is all of those pieces that those guys had set in place all those years ago, and then people have just built on those building blocks. And you just go, well, Romain was saved by multiple people, but they wouldn't have got him. Maybe he wouldn't have survived if all of that work hadn't been done by the likes of Sid and Charlie. And I suppose that was the thing that I always took away from driving the safety car and being part of that for sort of 2.5 seasons.
We saw how well drilled the safety car team were. Has that moved on since when you did it?
Absolutely. And you know, so the safety car and the medical car, I was only ever in the safety car. The medical car was the one that really turned up, and they were the people that saved and helped save Romain. And but even when I was there driving the safety car and seeing how the medical car worked and the procedures that they had, that it's evolved for sure. It's definitely evolved, and they've learned and they've grown. And that's the key thing, isn't it? About all of the stuff that we do in motorsport is learning and growing and understanding and learning from your mistakes and learning, okay, how can we fix this so it doesn't happen again? And, you know, that, I think there were so many things that happened on that day that were just terrifying, but great, brilliant. I mean, the way that the car stood up, the way that all the safety systems worked, the way that they were there to save him and help him out of the flames. I mean, it was extraordinary to watch.
God knows how he got out of the car, really. When you actually see it, you know, and understand just kind of how close he came to, you know, being sort of stuck in that car. It was
have you seen his hands? He's just taken his dressings off today. Actually, his left hand is still, you know, really quite. You can see just how horrific it was. It's easy to think, you know, he had his flame suit on. It must have been okay, but
yeah, he should be fine though. He should be fine. Should we go on pass along some questions, Paul?
One thing before we do, I just feel like with such a fantastic room and array of articles behind Oliver, I think John Tuckwell should kick us off with just a question on some of those things, because you've got 5 Le Mans trophies there, and John wants to know. He always asks some good questions for our podcasts. One of our favourite listeners, Guy, and John Tuckwell wants to know which one was your favourite Le Mans victory and why.
So it's so hard. It's like trying to choose a child, you know. 2000 and the first one in 2002 was very special. Always special to have your first, but I am a bit drawn, but sort of stuck between 2006 and 2015, because 6 was third win in a row with Olivier and Jan, and the same crew chief, same team, same start number, and for us to do that against ProDrive Aston Martin was pretty amazing and spectacular. And funnily enough, each year leading up to the race, I'd always have a bet with the boss at ProDrive Aston Martin, George Howard Chappell. We'd always have a £50 waiver on who was going to win. And so that year in 2006, I took the money off of him, the £50, and he very sort of begrudgingly, but still honestly, came over and he gave me the money, and he said, next year. After 3 years of being beaten in a row, he was like, next year we're going to get you. And that's what I loved about racing against George. He just never, ever gave up. And next year he did. I had to go and give him the 50 quid because he beat us. And then again in 2008, I had to go and give him another 50 quid. So it's, you know, it was just great sort of tit for tat, backwards and forwards. So 2006.
Brilliant. Right then. We're ready. So I've got some questions for you, Ollie, just some quick ones. So just have to sort of, first thing that comes into mind. Right, here we go. So Top Gear or Grand Tour?
Top Gear.
Daytona or Sebring?
Sebring.
Beach holiday or adventure holiday?
Adventure holiday.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Oversteer or understeer?
Oversteer.
CR7 or CR8?
C7R.
That's it. That's the
two things. Firstly, dogs. Again, we're starting the second series off with racing drivers just like dogs. It seems to be a thing. And secondly, when Top Gear then get your Corvette when it comes out, will you be donning the white suit? That's how it works.
Yeah. Ooh.
I tell you what. Imagine Ollie as the Stig. I mean, it'd be like you'd know straight away, wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. There's no hiding.
Bit of camera magic. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got.
It wasn't a no, though, was it?
I couldn't possibly say any more.
All we know is
Either confirm or deny.
Actually, I've got a question for you. So Nick Tandy is gone to Corvette.
Yeah.
Do you have to be from Northampton to be a Corvette driver? Then?
North Bedfordshire.
North Bedfordshire. Yeah. Well, you know,
the North Bedfordshire boys. So here's the thing.
Like the next village or something to you. Isn't
Yeah.
it?
So Nick and I, we went to the same primary school.
No way.
We went to the same secondary school. When I started racing in Formula 3, I went down and I spoke to the kids at the primary school that I went to, Pinchmill in Felmersham. And one of the kids in the class listening to me talk was Nick Tandy. I gave him a signed poster of my car, Formula 3 car, and he kept it on his wall for a number of years. I think he's burnt it now or done something with it. And
can I say, just keep him away from your wife, will you?
Yeah. and so when it was all when everything was sort of going along with Corvette this last year, and the team started talking to me about how it's all going to work, and you know, and then I said, so okay, so who's going to replace me full time? And they said, well, Nick Tandy. And I thought, well, they of all the guys in this series or up and down GT racing, if it was me running the team, I would have chosen him.
Yeah.
He would have been the guy that I would have gone, no, need to get that guy.
Yeah.
And so Nick now lives in the same village as my parents, only maybe a quarter of a mile away.
Wow.
North Bedfordshire, and that's the village that I grew up in. And so it's sort of like, okay, Ollie's out of the 4-car, not racing that anymore. But need to go and get someone else from North Bedfordshire. Who else lives in North Bedfordshire?
Are they going to twin North Bedfordshire with Detroit or something?
Yeah, maybe they will. Yes. So New Hudson, Michigan. That's it. And,
is it all right? Okay.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. That's the way it's gone. But he'll do brilliantly there. You know, he's going to have a great time. He loves. I think more than anything, Nick has a massive passion for racing in the US, and he has just this great passion for just competing and driving and wanting to win, and that's what the team want.
Did he grow up with you as his racing hero then?
I don't know whether I was
from school.
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, you know, now, you know, we've raced against one another many times, and actually, when we raced at Laguna Seca towards the end of last year, I was staying in a little house, and he came over and we had a cup of tea and we just talked stuff through, and it was great to be able to sort of, you know, almost like hand over the keys and sort of say, look, there you go, Nick. You know, I've looked after it for the last 18 years. You now have a go in the 4-car and see how you get
really
on.
Cool. It's a bit like the photo of George Russell waiting to get Lewis to sign his poster.
Yeah,
right. on Instagram recently. Similar sort of thing.
I suppose so. And you know, it's like you said, you know, earlier on, Guy. You know, you sort of see the younger generation coming through, and I know Nick's not that young, but he certainly is significantly younger than me, and you know, he is right in that sweet spot. You know, when you're looking at the drivers who are really right there in the zone, really on it. You know, age, experience, speed. You know, all those things, and you know, Corvette Racing really took a view towards the end of last year. It was like, okay, with COVID and all kinds of other things that are going on, there's a number of really, really good guys on the market, and we want to pounce and get these guys so we can secure them for the next number of years and take them away from other manufacturers, because that's always been Corvette's way, their plan. They did it with me. They took me away from Celine. They took Jan away from Ferrari when he was driving for them against us. They took Antonio away from Aston Martin when he was racing against us in that. Tommy came from BMW, took him away from BMW. So again, it's all the way. It's just their strategy and the way that they did it to make. What's one of the best ways of beating that manufacturer? Oh, if we take away their best driver, that's a good way.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of changes now. You know, obviously, you know, once you announced your departure, obviously Pratt & Miller being sold, the Doug Feehan leaving. You know, there's a lot of, you know, it's going to be a big for an organisation that's been stable for so many years to take for example, you out the equation is a big upset. I mean, you know, it will take time, but then you take Feehan out the equation, which is also, you know, massive part of the program. It's gonna. I mean, you know, I'm sure they'll find the feet, but there's a lot of upheaval there.
Yeah, there is a lot of change. I wouldn't necessarily call it upheaval. I mean, it's been in the works for a little while, and you know, they recognise that there needs to be some change, and that yes, the new blood's coming through. You know, with Pratt Miller being sold to Oshkosh, I don't think that that's something that is a big deal either. That really big part of them wanting to come in was the racing program and the Corvette Racing program and the stability that's had and the expertise that sort of brings into the business. And so, you know, I do see that, you know, everything has to move on, doesn't it, and evolve and change. And yes, of course, Doug has been a massive part of Corvette Racing right from the very start. He started the program, you know, and you know, I've seen him stand up and sort of almost beat his chest and sort of give us these sort of rallying speeches and then do the same down at the Corvette Corral to all the owners. And I mean, the guy should have been on stage. It's brilliant. It's just such a great storyteller, such a fantastic sort of, he just had this personality that could just draw people in.
Yeah.
I mean, he could bullshit amazingly as well, you know.
Well, you have to in this sport, don't you? So
yeah, definitely.
So, right, Ollie, so back to my little list here. So I've got a question from Matthew Wilson. He said, if you could drive any car from any era, what would it be?
Wow. Any car from any era.
It's a tricky one when you're on the spot, isn't it?
It is.
There's so many great cars.
Well, I wouldn't mind having a go in that Bentley you drove, Guy. That looked like quite.
That was easy.
That looked like quite a lot of fun. I like a pedal in that.
Yeah, not a bad car. Yeah, it's a bit tight on room though. That's the only thing. But
oh, is it?
Yeah,
me being so tall.
Yeah,
maybe I would have. I've got to squeeze myself in.
Yeah, you'd have been fine. Yeah. Or maybe going to Formula First car again, just to kind of.
Well, just to sort of bring back all those lovely memories. I mean,
full circle.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's a Formula First. I mean, the series was very good to me. I won a lot of races in it, and I do remember it being a lot of fun. But I just don't really remember the car being that great to drive.
They don't look that great either. I'm going to find a picture to put on Instagram after this.
Good, do that.
So, Ollie, do you have a question for our next? We don't know who our next guest is going to be yet because we just kind of usually just wing it. But if it's someone to do with motorsport, but the question could be anything.
Okay, so the worst prank a teammate has ever pulled on you.
Right.
What is that?
Okay.
What's yours?
I had a teammate called Kelly Collins, and I asked him to give. I stayed at his house, stupidly, and Kelly was wild. He's a Californian boy, loved surfing, and I said, I need a bit of a haircut. Can you sort of help me out? And he gave me a mohawk. And he wouldn't do anything with it. He made me wear it for a week. Unfortunately, I was staying with him for a couple of weeks in between races, but he just gave me a mohawk.
You've got to have a picture. You've got to have a picture of that.
I'm sure that there is somewhere on the dark web, you know. He'll be out there somewhere.
I'm not actually on the dark web, but Paul might be able to find something.
I'm on the dark web. It's a guy, best prank that you've had pulled on you by a teammate.
I've had. I mean, you know, a lot of the usuals. I mean, I've had the old drinks bottle. We've all done the old drinks bottle, and then you're there, like, you know, in the car sucking away on the drinks bottle, and then teammate pulls out his phone where the drinks tube's up his bum.
Yeah,
we've all had that one, and I've had things where by mechanics. But I remember once I was doing, I think it was maybe Indy Lights, and the mechanics had they'd taken my hire car, they changed all the wheels, they put like space savers on all the wheels. They connected all the the water wipers to so that squirted all kinds of like fairy liquid and stuff and this kind of stuff in it. I mean, you name it, they just completely trashed the rental car. So that wasn't a lot of fun.
I did have a wild ride with Olivier Beretta once, where we had a PR guy called Ryan. No, not Ryan. Yeah, it was Ryan, and Olivier had got himself in the driver's seat of this car, and we were at some PR event, and Olivier just convinced the PR guy that he was going to drive us back to the hotel, and so I thought this would be fine because Olivier had driven me loads of times and it had always been so sedate, really calm, but it was like sitting next to the devil. I mean, he grew horns that day, Olivier, and he had the thing sideways, in the ditch, out the ditch, spinning it round and round. There was not every single tire was flat spotted. And then his thing that he finished off with was that he got us sort of like on this nice straight bit of road, and he just put it in cruise control, just wound the seat back, and then got out of the driver's seat and got into the back seat. So the car's driving down the road,
oh my God,
on cruise control with nobody driving it. And I was like turning around to him, and I knew Olivier wasn't going to get back in the driver's seat. He was just not going to do it. And so the PR guy is in the fetal position in the back of the car, screaming for his mum, just absolutely completely lost it. And I'm sitting there thinking, Olivia, you're going to get back in? No. So I'm then trying to clamber over and get into without crashing the thing, and I've managed to get it back under control. And Olivier just had a switch. Just it was nuts.
It's all good fun. Well, hopefully, Ollie, we're going to see you back at back racing this year, and I'm hoping to do a couple of races in the US this year as well. So,
are you?
Yeah, so I might see you at a few races this year potentially.
That's a scoop of sorts to finish off with.
Well, sort of retired, out of retirement, into I'm all stuff. So yeah,
we've got to that zone, haven't we, Guy?
Yeah, just kind of keeping my hand in for a bit of fun. But I mean, it's like a drug; you miss it, and I think you as much as you miss the driving, which is the great part about it. It's like Ollie said, it's the the camaraderie with the other drivers, the team members. It's good fun. So why not? That's why I say. So thanks again, Ollie. Really enjoyed catching up with you. And
it's been great fun.
Yeah, we'll definitely we'll definitely grab a beer in the US, or if at some point whenever we can grab a beer again. And,
whenever that is.
And we thanks for coming on the podcast.
Remember, if you are listening to this on iTunes or wherever you download your podcasts, you can also watch it on YouTube and vice versa. We're hoping to put some other bits on YouTube as well this year. And we've got to do this thing where you were reunited with your old or very first yard kart, Guy.
Yes, we have. Yeah. I've got my first ever kart, Ollie, that Paul's managed to find.
Wow.
I've got to do it reunited with that. And I'll keep posting some old pictures on Instagram. I keep finding as I'm going through pictures.
Brilliant.
So,
they're great.
And we'll look forward to the Mohawk. Cheers, guys.
Yeah, great to see you.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.